Okay, let's talk about what's been going on in the country of Burkina Faso and with its current leader, Ibrahim Traoré. Now, this is a story that's been developing for quite a while now, and it's a huge story. It's gotten a lot of attention internationally, online, and rightfully so, because this is a story that has literally world-altering implications. Yet, the entire Western mainstream media seems to be completely ignoring this story. Completely. I think it's an absolute disgrace. It shows an incredible lack of respect on the part of the Western mainstream media. I think they should be ashamed of themselves. Now, to be honest, of course, I do understand why they've been ignoring this. And that's because, as we all should know by now, Western mainstream media is very much controlled by the Western global elites who still have a very imperialist, a very neo-colonialist mindset. And giving this story even more attention would go against their interests. So it seems like they're doing everything to suppress it. Now, what is going on? Let me briefly try to explain. I'm probably not going to do it justice in my brief explanation, but just to give you a little bit of an idea of what is going on. Now, as we all know, the global West has treated Africa, the African continent, and African people like dirt, like garbage, like animals. Right? So first the Europeans went to Africa, they sowed death and destruction, they colonized the place, they suppressed the indigenous people, they killed, they robbed. At one point they even took some of the people from their loved ones, shipped them overseas like commodities and put them to work as slaves. We all know that story. And of course the Westerners also took their natural resources. And exactly that, the taking of their natural resources, has been fundamental to the economic prosperity that the global West has experienced, and apparently they got addicted to it. So this has been going on for many centuries and it's still going on to this day. Now, as I've also kind of mentioned in another video, so the names have changed a little bit. So we used to talk about the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, the Belgians. Now all of these countries are still very much involved in all of this, but when it comes to Africa, we talk a little bit more now about the French and the Americans, the United States. Now the methods they're using have changed quite a bit. So they used to come in with a lot of obvious ruthless brute force. Nowadays, well, they're probably still as ruthless, if not worse, but they're not as obvious anymore. Now they have a lot of very sophisticated dirty tricks up their sleeves. So now they come in offering all kinds of aid, so food aid, medical aid, military aid. So you have to understand that the global West has a reputation of using different terrorist groups to cause a lot of unrest all over the world, also in Africa. And then they go to these countries and they tell them, well, we will give you protection. We will give you military protection. By the way, they won't allow these countries to develop their own military forces. They won't help them with that, but they just say, well, we will protect you. We will give you military protection. Okay, protection from what exactly? From these terrorist groups that you put in place? I mean, these are literally mafia practices. Now, the West has also created conditions for there to be a lot of corruption. They've also installed a lot of puppet regimes. These regimes, of course, are there to represent the interest of the global West. Now, also, the West has practically forced some of these countries to take a lot of loans from the World Bank and the IMF, which, in my opinion, are just tools of the global West. These loans obviously have a lot of conditions attached to them. To give you an example, so some of these countries are allowed to engage in agriculture, but only for export, not for its own use, because God forbid some of these countries may develop some kind of self-sufficiency, and we can't have that, because that way the West would lose control, and it is all about control. The West needs these countries, needs African countries to stay dependent on the West so that they have control over them and they can still quietly take their natural resources. Now, some people sometimes ask, so why is Africa still so poor? Why is it still so underdeveloped? Well, it's exactly because of this. Some people also ask, so why doesn't Africa do something about this? Well, you have to understand that once the global West has its claws on you, it's very difficult to escape. I mean, there have been attempts before. There have been African world leaders who tried to do something about this. What usually happened is that they ended up dead, assassinated. So that is what Africa has had to deal with. So it takes very, very strong and very brave leadership to stand up against the global West. Now, luckily, such leaders still exist. So recently, there's been a development in some countries in the Sahel region where the leaders of those countries have shown great defiance against Western neo-colonialism. So the countries I'm talking about are, of course, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And especially the leader of Burkina Faso, whose name is Ibrahim Traoré, has become the symbol of this movement. So he kicked out Western military forces and started developing Burkina Faso's own military army. He kicked out primarily French gold miners and opened the door for indigenous miners. He rejected some loans from the global West. He invested in infrastructure, education, and agriculture, and in this case, agriculture for their own use. You know, he's taken a lot of measures to help the people of his country and to stop the exploitation of Burkina Faso by the global West. And by the way, in doing so, he increased the GDP of his country 17% in only 2 years. So he's clearly fighting for the independence of his country, and he is proving that it is possible to be independent from the global West. Now, obviously, this has made him very, very popular, not only in Burkina Faso, but in the entire continent of Africa and even far beyond that. Because as I mentioned, he has now become the symbol, the face of resistance against Western imperialism in the global South. Now, of course, as I mentioned, it has happened before that African world leaders have stood up against the global West. And usually it didn't really end very well for them, unfortunately. But I do believe that this time things might be a little bit different. And the reason is that, as I mentioned, this story has gotten so much attention internationally. It seems to have sparked something within the entire African population, from north to south, from east to west. I mean, the unrest, the feeling of being suppressed by the global West for so many years, the feeling of injustice. It's been brewing for many, many years in Africa, and it seems like finally now they have something to hold on to cling on to, and to collectively voice their opinion and collectively oppose the global West. Now, of course, Ibrahim Traoré is not out of the woods yet. Already we're seeing signs that the global West is trying to get rid of him. General Michael Langley of the United States has already accused him of stealing gold of its own country, but stealing it for its own personal gains, which personally I believe is absolute nonsense. But already we're seeing that they're trying to paint him as the bad guy. Also, we've seen outright imperialistic imperialistical remarks from French President Emmanuel Macron, who said that Africa should be grateful to France and Africa needs France. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace, this man. And also there have been several coup attempts already in Burkina Faso, so attempts to overthrow the Traoré government. So, you know, it's very much seems that they're really trying to get rid of him. So he's certainly not out of the woods yet. And of course, I know that the global West is still very powerful and has a lot of tentacles everywhere, but still I'm pretty optimistic about the outcome of all of this. And again, the reason for that is because this story has gotten so big and has reached so many people. I believe that the genie is now out of the bottle. Africa is waking up and they're starting to see through the lies that the global West has been selling them. I even believe that even if they somehow would manage to get rid of Ibrahim Traoré, God forbid, a new Ibrahim Traoré would stand up, and another one, because I believe that Africa and Africans have had enough. They're not gonna put up with this any longer. Now, in closing, let me tell you why I wanted to tell this story. So, this story, this development getting more and more attention is actually kryptonite to these Western imperialist powers. And the reason for that is that, of course, they absolutely know that what they're doing is very, very wrong. It's evil, right? So they need secrecy to operate, because they also know that if this gets out in the open, then people are not going to put up with this and they will lose their powers. So all that I can do at the moment, as far as I know, in support of the people of Burkina Faso, the people of Africa, the people of the global south, and frankly everyone around the world that values freedom, is to tell this story. So if you hear this, then first of all, thanks for watching. But second of all, I'm going to ask you to spread the word for Africa and for freedom.